All right, everybody. Welcome to a time to appreciate Joe Bullick and his heritage. Joe Bullick had the all too rare gift of sharing love and joy. Joe was ubiquitous and his spirit indomitable. That's why we're here today. Joe's legacy lives on in the things he gathered, representations and reflections of our heritage. You can hear him laugh and dash around, telling a story about any particular item displayed here. Well, that's what today is. That's what this Heritage Center is, embodying and sharing the past, and in today's vernacular, feeling the love, the kind of love that Joe Bullick had for us. And that's the legacy. Remember the past, learn from it, and love each other beyond these doors.
Good afternoon. Emma, thank you for sharing Joe for all these years. My name is Rick Weber. I had the pleasure and honor of knowing Joe when I moved to Ingomar at 11 years old. Joe started as the custodian at Ingomar School the same time I moved into Ingomar. He adopted 8 of us as his kids, and he called us from that day forward his Ingomar boys. There's 4 of us left. Unfortunately, they're traveling. As far as Joe, I get a lot of stories about Joe. We were fortunate enough for the last 15 years always to share his birthday or near his birthday. In 2017, we had here. We took Emma to lunch. So I can give you a lot of stories about Joe, but the biggest thing I can tell you, you're here because of Joe. Joe was a big man, and there's one reason why he was a big man, because he was filled with a heart. His heart was bigger than anyone I've ever met. Joe gave you unconditional love. He was my surrogate father, my mentor, my friend. When 3 of his boys went to Vietnam, Joe would send us letters telling us how much he loved us and to always do the right thing. The attitude to life is serving others, never lost in its intensity. He will never be an amateur. Joe was always a pro at love. There are so many things that we know about Joe. You know, any person that ever Joe coached, whether it was girls softball, golf, bowling, anything he taught, he wrapped his arms around his kids. He gave them everything he had, and they gave it back. I will miss Joe. We will. The last thing Joe said to us last October, when we were at my house having his breakfast or having his birthday, he said, "I'm writing my 3rd book. I need help. Each of you are charged with writing a chapter." I called all of my friends, and no one has done it. So it's up to you. On Joe's 80th birthday, they had a high mass at St. Alphonsus. And Joe was up front. Joe went to church every day. Joe was a godly man. But after the service, there was a reception downstairs for all his friends, and class was packed. Joe said to us boys, the Ingomar boys, "Stick around. I need help cleaning up." But that wasn't the reason. We ended up shooting hoops for 2 hours downstairs. And then he said, "I'm walking up to church. I'll meet you over at Cole's Tavern." So we went over there for lunch. We got there first, walked in, and there was a bunch of guys that probably been there for 10 years, still sitting at the stools. They said, "What are you guys doing here?" We said, "It's Joe Bullick's birthday." "Oh," they said, "great." And there just happened to be 2 young ladies, 25, have no idea why they were going to Cole's Tavern, but so they asked us what we were there for, and we told them it was Joe's birthday. They didn't know Joe Bullick. But when Joe walked in the door, the whole bar started yelling, singing "Happy Birthday" to Joe. These 2 young women who did not know Joe jumped up and started dancing around him. Well, you can imagine Joe's face. He laughed and laughed. So the one thing, this was Joe's legacy, the museum. But we all know that Joe loved life, but he loved us all. Thank you, and God bless you, Joe.
I've known Joe for a long time. When we started the Community Day Committee, who are we going to put on this committee? Well, it started, as you know, this Community Day started as a sesquicentennial committee, the 150th anniversary of the chartering of the town of McCandless. So we started gathering people on the committee, and I called Joe. He says, "What are you getting me into this time, Jer?" And I said, "Well, I think you'll like this." And I told him what we were going to do. And we had a subcommittee. And the subcommittee was to write the town of McCandless history. And of course, Joe had written his school history, and I had read that. I said, "Well, you got some of it done. Most of it's done here, and you just have to see what you can do to expand it a bit, make it more toward the time." So he did. He had a committee of strong people to help him, and he produced our first Community Day booklet, which is actually a history of the town of McCandless. So that's some of the things that Joe did. But Joe was everything to everybody. I don't think he had a mean bone in his body. And he would help anybody who was in need. He'd see somebody in need, and he would help them. He was quite a conductor of the affairs. One of our friends passed. His funeral was at St. Alphonsus, and it rained that day at the funeral. And what was Joe doing when we pulled into the parking lot? He's taking people in, and he's escorting the women in from the car to the church. I said, "Well, what are you going to do about me?" He says, "You know your way around, and you're not going to melt. You're not sugar."
Joe and I go back a long way. In 1983, I was a first grade teacher at SB Elementary, and in those days, I would sometimes work till 8 or 9 o'clock at night getting ready for the kids for the next day. And I was in my room working, and I hear this voice saying, "Hello there." And I'm looking and thinking, gosh, who's in the school this late at night? It was Joe Bullick, and he was checking on his evening custodians to make sure that the work was getting done. Little did I know that I would end up spending 20 years at McKnight with him, with his history museum. I don't know the whole history of the whole history museum, but I believe it started at Bradford Woods in the log cabin, somehow moved to Ingomar, and when Ingomar Elementary and Dr. Chamara ran out of space over there, it moved to McKnight Elementary, and it was housed there for a very long time. One of the things that Joe did, and maybe some of you know this, I know some of the teachers from McKnight that are here know this, every year that he was there for those 20 years, he would buy a puzzle. And this puzzle was the last puzzle when I was principal, and it hung in the McKnight Library for about the last 6 or 7 years. But he would buy the puzzle for the 5th grade students for in the spring when we'd get rainy days, they didn't really have anything to do, and they would work on these puzzles. He took this one knowing it was my last year as principal, mounted it and put the clock in, and like I said, it hung there at McKnight Elementary the last 6 years. They're going through another renovation, and the librarian, Kristen Faulkner there, called me and said, "Would you want this clock?" And I said, "Yes, I do want this clock, and I'm going to donate it to the History Museum here in McCandless, because I think that's where it belongs with Joe and all of his other artifacts." One last thing I want to say, maybe two last things. Joe was like a father to me. My father died at a very early age. I was only 28 years old, had just had my first son, and I had just come back to McKnight Elementary in the early 90s as principal after being principal or assistant principal there for a while. And that's about when the History Museum was moving in. So he would check on me and he'd ask how I was doing, and that was just the kind of person that he was. But he invited me for a round of golf at Highland Country Club because he knew I was the swimming pool manager there. And it was a day like today. And it was really hot. And it was just Joe and I, and we're carrying clubs. And I'm walking with Joe. I think I had one of the best rounds of golf because I think my father was watching, and then I had coaching from Joe. And if you knew anything about Joe, he was a heck of a coach, and he gave great feedback. Enjoyed that round of golf. I will never forget it. Lastly, I will say one of my favorite jokes he would tell would be the Yogi Berra joke, and everyone knows this joke. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. God bless all of you here today and all the people that couldn't be here, and God bless Joe Bullick, and God bless Emma and your family for sharing him with us. He's one person I will never forget. Thank you.
Joe and I met my first day on the job. He said, "Hi honey, you're new, I don't know you, what's your name?" Of course he did, right? And we became great friends from then. And I know he was custodian at other schools, but he would stop by at NAI just to see the friends. And so I was one of those, so that was great. I became a girls golf coach in 1978, and then I moved on to boys golf in 1983 maybe. And Joe took my position as varsity head girls golf, and I went to varsity head boys golf. Well, you know, the golf schedule is really compact and really complicated. And Joe would come into my classroom no matter what I was teaching. "Dede, look at the schedule. What should I do? What time should I leave?" I mean, it was all new. So it was my great pleasure to sort of mentor Joe in his first few years there of coaching girls golf. And I was lucky enough to serve on the WPIL Golf Committee for 38 years. So running all the tournaments, I got extra time to spend with my friend Joe, which was great. Just like Steve Parks, I also had many rounds of playing golf with Joe, and that was wonderful. When I think of Joe, I think of the word loyal. I also think of reliable and responsible. Joe was all of those to all of us. He was so loyal, going to church every day, and always practicing his faith and giving his idea of Christianity and faith to others without pushing it on anyone. He was just so good. When my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, Joe was there for me all the time, checking in, how's Scotty? And of course he came to the funeral because that's who he was. He was a great friend to everybody. Sorry about this. I love Joe Bullick. I love Emma Bullick, and I love their granddaughter, Gail, who is my student. I am so honored to be able to speak here. And one funny story is, when Joe had that old pale yellow truck, you know the one I mean? The district sort of frowned on him driving that around. So he took black electrical tape and made these crazy letters that said NA on the doors. But okay, you don't like it? Here it is. So I thought that was a really great way of handling the people that didn't like him. As Joe would say, God bless. Thank you very much.
I met Joe probably 6 or 8 years ago. He lived just down the street from us, and I was always on call whenever he needed anything, and I loved that fact. I'm going to steal my thunder from Joe and keep this short and sweet because we all know he didn't like to talk much. I first met Joe when he was serving as an altar boy at St. Alexis every morning at 7 a.m. He joined our men's group and participated in that as much as he could. And I guess there's three words that to me describe Joe, and that would be faith, family, and community. And I mean, he lived them to the hilt. Just one strong person. I lost 2 friends this year. One a rough and tough cowboy out in Utah who reminded me to always say I love you to his kids. And Joe, who always ended with 2 words, which I'll leave with you, and that was God bless, and he meant them. And so do I. Thank you all.
I have 2 duties. Paul Chamorro, who could not be here today. His wife is a person who's never missed a Penn State football game in 23 years. Well, she's not missing today's, and he was her driver. So that's where they are. He is a professional framer. So he gave up framing and went into North Allegheny principalship. This is his latest frame, and it took him a long time to get the pictures. So, the middle one was the hardest because he's never with Emma. I think he was looking for that picture, a picture with Emma, and it's a late one, but he had a very, very hard time finding it, and I was enlisted on his committee as I was on many of Joe's. But what I want to say is Joe made us better. He would come to us with a problem, either assign it to us or ask us to help him, and we would accomplish more than we would ever think of otherwise. And that happened to a lot of us. And one last thing, Joe learned, and I think it's said by a few people, but Joe learned. His mother said to him, always treat people well, and he always treated people well. When he went to visit someone, he always had a gift. Even when he went to the doctor, he would take flowers to the nurses. Of course, he got better service, but he was no dummy. And final thing, Joe had me, I probably had a lot of people do this, but I would go to his house and work on the computer to get rid of all the junk, and he would say, how about answering these emails? At the end of every email, he would say the same thing, God bless Joe. I thought, wow, what a neat way to get people to say, God bless Joe. And it's smart, another smart move. Anyway, thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you for being here with your family. We need you to help us with something, okay? Would you help me with something here? Would you give me a hand? Gang, would you come around? Help Grandma out here? So what we thought ought to be a good thing for this Heritage Center is, Emma, do you want to pull that off for us? Is we wanted to have Joe Bullick's smiling face shining down on us for posterity. What you're seeing here is the representation for the bronze plaque, three-dimensional, as Joe is a multi-dimensional guy, of course, so we'll be hanging right here in the foyer of this building for as long as this building is standing. And as we all would wish to Emma and her family and to each other, let's all say those two words together. God bless. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.